Hey everyone, hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. Como siempre, thank you to all for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, as the love and support everyone shares with me. From the heart, I'm humble and appreciated to every single one of you. Also, do please like, share, subscribe, and hype the video to help this get out a little further. Well, everyone, getting right into the topic I want to touch on today, right? Today I'm going to try to reply a question I've been asked not once but many times since I've been on YouTube, right? Which is, when was the first time I got discouraged or started seeing things differently, right? And let me first start off with, I was an idiot, right? I loved our cause, our movement, and whatever you had to tolerate to keep pushing for a movement, I was there, right? I was that individual, never questioning, never sidetracking, never breaking, right? But, back when I was in Cali, all that existed, per se, was the California faction, right? And I was aware of the feds, and I knew the feds worked on a bigger platform, per se, because who's out there, right? The reach, but nevertheless, it just didn't have nothing to do with us, right? Again, I was in Cali, right? That's why I say us. But the last thing on my mind was first to get out. I was never to get out because at the moment, the only route to get out was to weenie out and to breathe, right? And that it just wasn't going to happen, right? At least where my mindset was at. And I never thought I would be ended up going to the feds, right? Or that my case would be overturned under a technicality, you know. But anyways, I would end up on the feds, and I started seeing how they see California per se. California sees the feds as inferiors. The feds sees California as so too. It's just part of feeling my chingon type of thing, right? Now in the feds, I learned of the Mexican faction. For whatever is worth, and those that know, it's it's here, it's been here, and they're deeply in the mix. Maybe not if they even if they're not direct like the way I was when I came down here, right? But they're more close with the feds. That's just reality. With California, they bump heads a lot too, right? Because again, California, that's the base, right, per se. But they're the ones doing the least. They're just being sincere. And anyways, for this time, that was, you could say, an eye opener, right? For myself, it happened either end of 21, 22. So it ain't that old, right? I was still recovering somewhat from getting hit in Oaxaca, right, by a mess. And this is before I went up to the ranch. And I had heard in the state of a couple pilis, and that they were out here, doing their thing, but they weren't responding per se. They were just doing their thing, right? So I remember I became, not gonna say his secretary, but his chauffeur when it came to the old man from Ontario for a bit before I went up to the rancho, right? So during this time, I was driving him to certain places to see people and angles and prices. You know, it was different because, again, Daryl had Charola to work. So we were able to not go in as tourisms, but actually, best it up, you know, with toys and everything. So we ended up going one time to Fresnillo, Zacatecas, right? Or more so, there's a little rancho, literally right off Venice, Fresnillo, like 10 minutes, maybe at the most, right? It's called San Jose. And on here, all I was told as we were going over there was we were going to meet with the group that was popular at the time, right? Los Fresnillos. And basically, Daryl knew the individual. They went back quite a bit. So we were going to see if we were able to tap into another angle from a different faction, right? At the end of the day, it's all about opening pipelines, right? And send them to Cali or different states and get paid in Mexico. Now again, I'm in Mexico, but I see this and I'm an idiot, right? At all times, is I take it as politicking, right? California, there could be three Emmy members in the same pod, and all three of them dislike each other. So I went from to the feds that were woofing on the state, but okay with Mexico, to Mexico woofing on both. I took it as it's just the way them cats are, right? Nevertheless, getting back to what we were doing, we went into this little rancho and we got met by homies, straight up homies from Cali, right? All in good standings. They all did their time and came down to support this old man. I don't know if a lot of people are aware of him. He's just one of them that's literally in the shadows because he's permanently in Mexico. As you know, Fresnillos would end up joining Cabreras, right? So don't know where he stands at now, right? Just being sincere. But at this time, it was he had pulled right with Fresnillos, and if I was there, I had heard his name through conversations, right? Which is Caballo from Venice, and he left with a lot of promises to bring into play for other Pilis, right? But it seemed that he got out and he just says "f you" and continue. He did this, started doing his thing. Nevertheless, he was in contact with a lot of homies, and he started pulling his crew down to Mexico to build himself a little crew and base to go off what was his family, right? He joined his family to work and to win for him and him only. Anyways, old man D, we sat down. It was outside, right? Again, this is a rancho, so it's a little, you could say a little cabañita, but it ain't. It's more like a ranchito, right? Not that too big, but we're outside by some lychee trees, I remember. And there's Well, there's chairs, there's a little table there, and my job was old man D, right? And regardless of him being a pili, whatever, if things went down, is I disculpen, right? I had a service and I was gonna keep it. Anyways, the ones that we were there, we literally were by D and we turned around, right? Not disrespectfully showing our back to them. It's just we're in different territory per se, so we're letting them conversate, and we turn around and just pay attention to what's around, right? But you know how, especially like myself, right? I always like to be a fly in the wall because you can learn even from indirect conversations towards you, right? So in these conversations, D basically asked him, hey hermano, they've been asking about you. You don't have no plans of doing what was said before, and you know they retouched on whatever was promised amongst them, right? And before Homeboy answered, this other vato came in, right? And I sure didn't know the vato, but I guess he was robbed from Bakersfield. It was another senor, right? That had there a month, 2 months that he had gotten out, and when he said rob, it didn't really. Again, I was facing the other way, right? So I didn't get to see him, and them Daryl addressed him as Little Rob. So I was like, okay, I know who he is. Never met him in person, but I know who he is. And Little Rob was the one that said, "What has the Emma done for us?" We soared into it, and it's always been about another carnal politicking on what we're doing, wanting to be in our pockets. Some are just dope fiends, don't want to do nothing, but they want their cut. If not, they start causing problems. We're doing all the footwork. There's just no reason for that no more. And Daryl kept pressing on, well, I'm out here. I have a position, but I never forget. So Caballo laughed and told him, what you mean you didn't forget? You mean from the heart you're standing out there just because they're carnales? You're showing love? Or you're allowing them to tap into something and pay you for it, which was the case. And he says, so you ain't down with that either, right? You're working, you're in open avenues. You're playing the one you already had to gain feria from it, right? Which is true. And then Little Rob straight said, you know what? Where we're at, the position we're at, we have good solid camaradas we go back with. F the M. And this thing came out of me, I don't disrespect like this. When he said this, I'll be honest, I was waiting for a type of any type of tone, right? In a negative sense of from Daryl to turn around and I disculpen, it's boogie time, and you know I come to be taught. You don't disrespect the canal even if they're not there. You don't disrespect the clica because that's what we're there, right? To represent the presence even if they're not there. But to my surprise is there's a lot of money there came out from Daryl. I'm not asking you to get back in the phone and fool And Daryl got asked straight up, why are you not just sending them to your old neighborhood, to your brothers from your neighborhood, to them instead? You're selling to them. Yeah, you're using pipelines, but you're not allowing them to tap into them to prices. You know, in a sense, you want nothing to do with them, and you have no plans of going back, right? And this was one of them, you could say, eye openers for me, because I go back with Daryl since Corcoran Shoe, right? And he says, "You're right. I feel you. I'm fed up with it too, and I got a position here I'm not willing to give up just to let any pendejo come in." Those were his exact words. And again, I was a fly on the wall, callado, because, well, I never went against, my whole career, I never went against the green, right? Whatever it be, good, bad. So I just stood quiet, took it in, looked over, and seen the homie Lucifer from Tunerville. And he was as surprised as myself. You know, at the end of the conversation, Caballo from Venice and Little straight up told Daryl, "So you're coming to us because you want us to connect with them and give them prices, avenues, and get back in that fall in deep with them, right? You could also do that. We're holding a position too here, and it's our own position. We're not underneath someone, right? And we're not gonna do it. I disculpa, we're done with that. I am who I am, but where I'm at right now, I'm C3 from Fresnillos, códigos, and we didn't even have time to introduce ourselves to the camaradas that were there. At least 8, 10 of them, right? But they all stood in the same plan. All did shoe term and stuff. And Daryl said, "I appreciate you allowing me to get here." Caballo just said, "Look, you're down here with a position, so am I. You want to get together and do something and hit different parts of the state. No prices, though. If they want it, they're going to pay for what it's worth. There's no love there, period, point blank." That's why none of them have heard from me. And Daryl said, "I appreciate that, and I'll be in contact with you." And oh, definitely, Caballo had Colombianos y Uruguayos, excuse me, that were tapped into him, right? And Daryl was basically a position, but underneath the Nini, right? So it was in comparison to the position per se, even though Fresnillos are a lot more smaller, right? But in reality, Chapitos in Sonora were too. But anyways, that was one of the times that you could call me ignorant, right? 20 something years in the mix of politics and stuff and seeing so many things. And it took me to be a fly on the wall in a conversation amongst two women members in Mexico to see exactly how they feel against the cause. What cause? The only homie they introduced was the homie Boxer. Uh, where was Boxer from? No, he wasn't from 18. Oh, excuse me. They introduced Boxer, right? From West Los. When I took off, that was my soldado. Never did nothing wrong. I didn't do things to their liking. They stabbed them, removed them. Do you think I would have any love for them or respect? Do you think the fools with me are gonna respect that? You should be honest with them vatos right there. They're all camaradas. You should be sincere with them. Which that really opened my eyes too. I got a lot to learn, right? 20 something years have really just are nothing really. There's a saying, your whole life you're gonna learn, even when this life is over. Because you see the risk, the fear of death, of what's next, is what makes religions the way they are. Because we don't know what's there. We're gonna learn when we die. So you die learning. But anyways, this was more so to answer the question, right? This was the one time I was straight up disillusioned with what I heard from two Pilis. We're speaking about Daryl. Caballo, I know he went back, but I personally didn't have no runs with him. Well busted, right? I just knew he had gotten out, went MIA. I was surprised a little, Rob, because literally a year before he paroled, he got made. And he had already plans to come out with Caballo and go against what he had just barely made a promise to. But he was down over 20 years. I guess he's seen enough, of betrayals and lies. So again, I'm not on here to spread poison, but I'm on here to give you an in look and advise you. There's a lot of clecha there. Being a campolero, being for the causa, ain't just getting your money, going in and keep pressing it, getting your money, making yourself relevant. You cannot stay relevant and Atecato's mind. Issues uprise. Think about it. An M member ain't allowed to politic on another M member, to encroach territory, to step on toes. They always do that against each other. Speak ill. So if they do so, as this conversation, think about what's up or how they're going to angle you as a camarada. Again, this was to answer a question. Stay true to yourself and loyal to loved ones.
This is what we started. We always